Hi guys, my name is Michelle Bartley, and this is my PLC signature assessment project. Okay, so for my PLC meeting agenda, of course, we will be assigning the roles of the team members that are in the PLC. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic at this time, my coworkers cannot be here, but I'm going to implement it as if they were, and I would have a timekeeper to keep up with the time and the pace of the meeting, a facilitator, someone who would help the meeting keep in flow and on task, and then of course I would be the presenter. So then we're going to have a brief introduction to the teacher as a leader program. Then you'll have your review of vision statement. We will look at 4 essential questions. What do we want our students to learn? How will we know when the students have learned what we want them to learn? How we will respond when students do not learn, and how we will enrich those students who have already learned what we need them to learn. Then we will discuss the PLC project. We will look at and state the problem. We'll introduce a strategy and an intervention, and then we will talk about the article that I chose to implement in my classroom. And then we will discuss the implementation and the strategy of the intervention. We will look at data analysis, and then of course we will have a reflection including the next possible steps that we could use. And then we will look at the teacher activity, give one question, and then at least give one suggestion, and then of course we will do a wrap-up at the end. I hope you're following along. My vision statement as a teacher leader is to be a positive influence to other teacher leaders around me. While creating a safe and trusting culture in my classroom, I will strive to teach each student and help them achieve personal success so that they will become a responsible and productive citizen. Okay, so the first part of my PLC project, my problem would be that in my classroom, especially as a special education teacher, I'm seeing several students struggle with their reading fluency, each having different learning difficulties impacting their fluency, and with one of the most common with my special needs students being dyslexia. We're seeing a lot of students who are coming up being dyslexic, and these students are experiencing such things as losing motivation to read, which results in less practice. They don't want to, they don't feel confident, therefore they don't read as much, which further leads to difficulties of their struggling with reading. That would be the problem. The strategy would be that students will improve their reading fluency and accuracy by self-monitoring their fluency speed, charting their daily progress, and earning rewards for improved performance. The plan would be, and this is where my article by Lo Y Cook comes into place. The article speaks of the benefits of students implementing self-monitoring system which increases on-task behaviors and academic achievement. It also talked about the positives of using a repeated reading program to improve their reading fluency skills. I will utilize this by implementing these assets into intervention number 1 of my plan. Now, especially with special needs students, we use reward systems and token systems quite a lot, and I've learned too with those students that if they are responsible each day to have a work folder, that they are responsible for coming in and getting every day, keeping up with their chart, kind of like a reward system in that way that they can physically keep track, that tends to motivate them too. So this article was really interesting for me, especially in my specialized field of teaching. Part 2 of my project would be the action plan for intervention 1, which would be that I would begin intervention by identifying the students that need help with their reading fluency. Now, of course, for me, this would be my students who get accommodations with reading assistance. So I would take those students and I would use a universal benchmark screener such as DIBELS or the MAP assessment reports or Ames Web or CTB. Then I would use a running record as well as an online tool called Reading Rocket to monitor the student's success. The students would be given a progress monitoring chart or a reward system where they will keep their own record of their progress for each day. They will be instructed to reflect on their previous scores from the days in the past, and they would be motivated to raise their current score each preceding day. The student would be given the same amount of time each day to complete their reading passage. They will chart their progress, and every time a student exceeds his or her score from the previous day, they will earn a reward. And then this gives you a look at my PLC project, the data analysis, and this is part 2 of my plan, actually looking at the data analysis and having it graphed out. So the graph shows the overall reading fluency intervention for 4 of my students over a 3-week period. You have student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4, and then of course you have their data points plot. So, and what this graph shows is that 3 out of 4 students showed improvement from the first week of intervention to the 3rd week of intervention, so the plan would be successful thus far. The reflection and the possible next steps. From the small amount of data that I had the opportunity to collect, I did start working on this before the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic came out. I was progress monitoring my reading students, working with Reading Rocket and giving them reading comprehension strategies to do and keeping their progress whenever I first started this. However, I had just collected 2 weeks of data at that point, and I put in another set. But from the small amount of data that I've had the opportunity to collect, it seems as though the intervention of using progress monitoring and using Reading Rocket as a tool, as well as them being responsible for doing their own progress monitoring, seems to be effective. But possible next steps could be continuing intervention 1 with those students who have been showing improvements. And implementing intervention 2 could be self-monitoring of attention. A lot of my special needs students have ADHD and they have trouble staying on task. So looking back at that article from Low Cook, they reflected more on not only progress monitoring individual and the success of that, but they looked at kids who have behavioral issues, underlying issues such as ADHD and staying on task and being able to focus and complete the task at hand. So that could be a possible next step as well, which could work very successfully for my special needs students. A brief explanation of the intervention 2 would be that I would create a student reading passage, which would be about 150 words or longer at a student's individual instructional level. Then we would kind of like group the students together, or I could be the tutor and then individually pull one student where we would practice a passage out loud while the student follows along with me silently, tracking their place with an index finger. During the initial read-through, I would stop several times at unpredictable points and ask the students selected at random to read the next word in a passage. So you could do this one-on-one, a tutor or a teacher and a student, or you could do like a set of 2 or 3 students. If I would be focusing more on behavioral issues, you would probably want to do it one-on-one. If not, you could probably do it in groups 2 or 3. Then we would also implement repeated readings, which is where I would have the students read the practice passages about 3 or 4 times and let the students engage in sequential reading. Like first one student reads a sentence, then the second reads a sentence, and then the third reads a sentence, with this process continuing like a round-robin fashion. And then we could do a phase drill error correction, which would be like during each repeated reading, the tutor writes down any word the student misreads or hesitates in reading for 3 seconds or longer. And then at the end of each reading, the tutor or the teacher would review these errors with the students for each error word, and then point to that word in the passage and ensure the students and make sure that the students are looking at the word and asks them to reread the word again. And then, of course, the tutor or the teacher would remind the student that they can earn a reward for following the directions and displaying good behavior and staying on task. And then I have my YouTube link to my PLC video for you to be able to access. And as far as wrapping up my PLC plan, the goal of this project and plan was for me personally to increase my special needs students' reading fluency skills, as well as present to you in the PLC ways that you can work with your lower level reading students to increase their reading fluency skills, because I know working one-on-one with you and you including me in your PLC groups as the regular ed teachers, we see a lot of kids who are being advanced on to the next grade level that are reading actually below grade level, and we want to bump them up to that next tier before retention begins. And then, of course, it is also my hope to share my action plan with my colleagues to promote success throughout your classrooms as well, and hopefully I can gain insight from you to implement strategies into my classroom. And that is the end of my PLC plan. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you got something from it, and I hope that you can implement some of these strategies into your classroom so that together we can see reading be successful for all of our students. Thank you very much for your time.